This episode is brought to you by Marvel Studios' Agatha All Along. The Guardian gives it 5 stars, declaring it royally entertaining. The LA Times says it's cleverly done and very funny. Collider calls it a magical romp of a show. Agatha All Along, for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Comedy Series. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another special Saturday edition of the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Today, I am sharing my conversation with someone who, I truly, no exaggeration, may have given the single best performance on television this year. Jenny Slate is already really well known for a wide range of comedic roles. She was the over-the-top Mona Lisa Saperstein on Parks and Recreation, and she also had a more bittersweet lead turn in the film Obvious Child. And she brings a lot of that warmth and humor to Dying for Sex. It's the FX limited series based on the podcast of the same name about a woman named Molly, she's played by Michelle Williams on the show, who is dying of cancer, and her best friend Nikki, played by Jenny Slate, who becomes her primary caretaker in the final months of her life. The show is about friendship between two funny and really appealing people, and it's co-created by New Girl veterans Liz Merriweather and Kim Rosenstock. So yes, it's got a lot of jokes. It's really genuinely funny. But then as the show evolves and as Molly gets sicker, it becomes a really deep reflection on friendship and grief and, yes, sex. There is really nothing like it, and as great as multiple Oscar nominee Michelle Williams is in the lead, Jenny Slate is such a revelation as Nikki. She's this dogged caretaker who totes around this binder full of Molly's medical information, but then she's also comic relief performing jokes and a full monologue from Clueless for Molly's benefit while she's intubated. And then as Jenny tells me in our conversation on this episode, those are all things that she knew she was capable of, but she really had to build up the courage and then, know how to ask a lot of big questions to be able to tackle on screen. We talk about what she's learned about what kind of questions to ask when taking on a project over the course of her career, and what she learned about sex from making this show, and much more. You can hear it all in my conversation with the star of Dying for Sex, Jenny Slate. I've read you talking about meeting Michelle for the first time and doing this, read and that building that relationship. But I don't think I've read you talking about Liz Merriweather and Kim Rosenstock and those early conversations with them. And, you're auditioning for them, so it's not like a chemistry read kind of situation. But maybe once you guys get started on the show, how did that relationship form? And you kind of know that they were the people who could kind of shepherd you through this role.
Well, I was already a really big fan. And, I at least want to trust. I think actors need to trust. It's weird. It's harder for me if there are like blocks, or I guess also that's not really my personality. Maybe I'm too trusting, but I think in the case of Liz and Kim, their writing spoke for itself. And then, their vibe was always just really friendly. I had not met Kim before, I don't think, but I'd met Liz just like in passing I think I met her at the Critics' Choice Awards.
I feel like she and Michelle had to start with the Critics' Choice. I love that just becomes this central through point for this show of an award show of all things.
Yeah, it is weird because you wouldn't think of it as maybe a place that's great for socializing, just because people are nervous and everyone's kind of looking over the person they're talking to just too much stimulation. But
yeah.
But for me, I think I always remember when someone has been friendly to me in a situation that most people find stressful. I remembered Liz just being really kind. And that also was the vibe in the chemistry read. That was the first time that I felt like I met all of them together. I had never really had more than a few words with Liz or Michelle. And they were really welcoming. I also had a sense that they were really confident in their writing, but that they were sensitive in a good way about the story, really wanting to do right by it, and their dedication to it, to the project, and making sure that it was honored. Really, I just found to be so attractive, and I felt really comfortable around them, really from the start. Other than those jitters of kind of wanting to make mommy proud or something, which is a very disgusting way to say that. And I wish I had at all. And we have video here, so it's double, you heard it, and
it's on the record.
Sucks. But I don't know if it's the speech team kid in me, the part of me that likes to earn it, likes to prove it. But I had a bit of that nervousness coming to set. Like I want to show them that they were right to choose me.
Yeah. And you talking about like feeling very trusting. Do you think that comes from having a career where you're showing up for one episode of a show and doing a thing and like doing a couple episode arc? Like, it's always interesting to me when people succeed in that way, where you're kind of bouncing in and out of different people's workplaces. And it seems to me like maybe being trusting and knowing you can jump into that helps make that possible.
Sure. I think that is definitely accurate. And I also think that the way I feel about performance is like, go now, just go now. Either go or don't go. You have to go. It's sort of like jumping on or off a train. You got to go. You know, you flinch, you hold back. Like that's when you hurt the performance. And I think that there are some things that I do hesitate about, but performance is not one of them. That doesn't mean that everything I do is like exactly as I wish that I had done it or something, but it is such a true love of mine that when I have the chance to perform, I make a lot of decisions. And sometimes I look back on my performance and I'm like, wow, I don't remember deciding to do that. But it's like something deep inside that has that kind of just innate, just go feeling. And for me, that comes with, and I'm lucky, I don't know why, the ability to trust. And maybe that's because I think there's something like inherently good in acting. It like is love to me. I just really do love it.
Yeah, I love something you said about wanting to be funny as a character again, as opposed to in your stand-up, because you've got so many kind of modes of expression. You're doing writing and stand-up and all of that stuff. But it seemed like doing that kind of expression as a character was something really specific. So what is the difference in how you get to, express humor specifically?
Oh, it's sort of like learning to dance using your body, but somebody else's shoes that aren't exactly the right size. And it's not wrong, but it's not part of you. It's not on you. I think maybe that goes back to just wanting to get to a new place and to show myself what I'm like in that new spot. And I know I'm like when I tell funny stories as myself, and I'm really proud of that instinct that I have and that weird compulsion to do that. But that also is, I don't know how to describe it. It's easier. It's easy for me to tell stories about my life. I think it's harder to be funny as someone else. And I want that challenge. It's like this perfect blend of using a skill set that I've got my 10,000 hours, Malcolm Gladwell hours in or whatever, but having to jump into something that was created by somebody else and somebody thought of it before I did. They had the image before I got there, and serving that, I just think it's such a wonderful collaborative thing, and it feels really good.
Yeah, well, and in the case of Dying for Sex, it's not just something someone thought of, but a person, a light who lives and, meets you and all of that stuff, which, it sounds like there wasn't really an opportunity to get into your head about like real Nikki versus you. Like there's enough fiction there. But I mean, I imagine that is at least one layer of greater challenge of putting yourself into something that you didn't think of first.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's something that I'm learning generally in my life, that it's a waste of time to make assumptions when you have the space to ask questions, even if it's uncomfortable. And so, for example, like when I got the role, I was like, well, how much of this, how much of the podcast do they want? How much do they want me to be? And then I thought, but I've already done the chemistry read, and I didn't ask that question then because it actually wasn't relevant for me in terms of like, not because I don't feel that the real wonderful Nikki Boyer is relevant, but that the way I read the script, it was a script that was asking for a freestanding performance based on the material that came before. And I think from that point, realizing that I hadn't asked that question and that my sort of like silent request, or that my request via my performance to do it my way, how I it was honored and was accepted, that if I did have questions again, I should just ask, even if it was uncomfortable. And so while I didn't have a lot of questions about the podcast, I had a lot of questions for Nikki. And as soon as I got to know her enough, I asked what I needed to ask if I felt unclear in areas where I felt like the character Nikki and the real Nikki might create kind of like a suture for me, and like understand how to fix that up. But
well, how did you get to be a good question asker? Like, have you always been that way, or did you kind of learn that over the course of a career?
Oh, I think it goes in and out because sometimes I can't tell if I'm being too familiar with people. So I want to know a lot, but I don't want people to feel that I'm invading their privacy. And in the case of Nikki, I didn't want her to feel that I was like mining her for information to help me be a better performer. Because there really is a middle zone there, of course, where it's like, hey, Nikki, I want to know how your anger feels in your body, or like, when does it flare for you? How similar are you to what is in the script? And it's for me, but and my performance. But by that time, I already know the real Nikki, and I really want to know. And there's a line where it's like appropriate to ask as a performer, but maybe painful to ask as a new friend.
Sure.
And I think a lot of it is really just feeling it out. But I think with maturity comes an understanding of like why one is curious and what curiosity is for, what other people's personal information or experiences are for. Like, why do we share that? And I think it's a great privilege to know any one true thing about someone, like what their favorite food, their favorite song. It's actually quite hard, I think, to share ourselves, especially today. Today. And I think I've just learned to feel it out and to become more comfortable with sometimes just keeping my questions to myself.
Well, you also said you feel comfortable talking about your own life and your stand-up. And so, like, there's that version, then there's the, like, I would like you to know nothing about me people. And I feel like sometimes, extroverts, so I consider myself one too, we have to be like, no, it's not for everybody. Not everyone wants to come out with that. And that's also just getting older, I think.
Totally. I was on the way the other night. I had an event for my book, and I was excited to go to it. And I really love reading pieces from my book aloud. But I know it doesn't seem believable, but at the bottom of whatever my emotional ecosystem is like a good, but also sometimes like uncomfortable shyness that is like a fear of not fitting in, or it just is it's like a little, why a rabbit runs away. It's just like, is this like safe or not? I've just had it always, and hasn't stopped me from doing things, but I notice it and I feel it. And I was saying to a friend of mine, well, what am I going to say to these people? I don't want to disappoint them, but I kind of can't remember sometimes how to be social. Like, I'm going to show up and say, hi, my name is Jenny Slate, and one thing about me is that my name is Jenny. Like what? It just seems impossible to me that I'll ever say anything again. And then the second I open my mouth, it's like, blah, 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 blah. It's yeah. I don't know.
But then when you talk, the more you talk to people about that, where you're like, oh wait, other people do that too. It's like it's a unifying thing about us.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Marvel Studios' Agatha All Along. The Guardian gives it 5 stars, declaring it royally entertaining. The LA Times says it's cleverly done and very funny. Collider calls it a magical romp of a show. Agatha All Along, for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Comedy Series. So I talked to Liz and Kim a little while ago about the writing process of it, and they were talking about what they learned about writing sex scenes from this show, and like they went to a WGA workshop and they kind of thought they knew all this stuff, and they realized how little they didn't know. And you've talked about how it's kind of reframed you thinking about like depiction of sex and talking about it, even though it's not such a big part of your performance. It's more Michelle Williams in that. But I just wonder if it was a similar learning process for you, where it's like, oh, we know how to do this. I'm an adult. I can handle this. And then kind of it blows your head off in a way about all the things that we don't talk about and haven't seen and weren't doing before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing is that when I was younger and I was doing sex scenes, nobody ever asked me, like, if I had kissed anyone on camera before, for example, like the time that I did. And I was like, totally blown away by what it was. Like, it's another person, and it's, you know, it's their body, and you're both in the space, and there's all these people watching, and like, and at that time, you know, 15 years ago or whatever, like, you're just kind of going for it. Like, everyone was just kind of going for it. That was my experience. I was lucky enough not to have a bad experience in that way. But I also, in order to, I guess, protect, because I did feel shy, asked myself zero questions and tried to keep my uncertainty to myself for fear that it would like ruin the vibe or bust me as, you know, someone that wasn't ready for that type of performance. And
well, in comedy too, I feel like there's always so much being like, I've been here before. I know how to do this. I can handle anything. There's a real vibe of that.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, and then I was lucky that, like, in the movie Obvious Child, Gillian Robespierre just has such a warm demeanor that I suddenly was able to just kind of like ask more questions about even simple things that it feels so like square of me to say, but even like kissing on set, you know, because like if you're too shy to ask what the shot is, you know, because it's your first real, you know, movie, like my first like lead role in a film, you know, that can make you feel that you're not really allowed to own your performance. And luckily with Gillian, like I really was allowed to feel that way and ask those questions. But by the time I got to Dine for Sex, I was just so aware of how caring I was about myself, and for me, how caring Kelvin Yu, my scene partner in like our sex scene, he was caring for himself. He was listening to me. It was a totally different setup. And of course, like that entire environment was created by Liz and Kim and our directors and our intimacy coordinator, Claire. And it was really the performance of it was different, but like in terms of the choreography, but the performance of the actual sex, I was just so aware in watching the show was geared towards a different type of gaze, not one person's gaze, but more of a multi, I don't know how to describe it. Like it just was.
No, I know what you mean though.
People. And I had never, I mean, like Michelle's orgasms, they're when Molly is masturbating, and there's so many different orgasms, and they're so funny. And I just remember being like, I read these scripts, I knew what would be here, but I've never seen anything like this before, and it was so funny to me and original. And I just think that comes from like stripping away everything that you might have seen before, or trying to be something, and just reaching for something new. And I do think what Liz and Kim did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I fell in love with a lot of aspects of the show, and Rob Delaney is obviously like a whole other planet. But I did feel like Nikki and Noah, right, as Kelvin Yu's character, Noah. Yeah. Nikki and Noah's romance like really grabbed me in this way I wasn't expecting, because it's not what the show is about. And it's not, and you're watching it being like, no, I'm supposed to be caring about the main story, but I was rooting for them so hard. I just wonder if that's something you thought about, like knowing this is a love story between friends, and that is what the point of the show is. But there's this whole side story that needs to have its own real weight to it, so that we kind of feel like Nikki's okay in the end in some ways, but also not that like, well, she's with a man, so therefore it's okay. Like it's so not that, which is not an easy thing to pull off. And that's writing, obviously, but I wonder how you thought about that part of the story.
I am always fine with a character being given as much story as they're going to give the character, as long as it doesn't feel forced, or like, you know, someone's just like sticking a sticker on the character, you know, like a relationship. She has a relationship. Like, just as in life, like people can be involved in simultaneous loving relationships. Some are platonic, some are romantic, some are familial, whatever. And the way I felt about it was like, give Nikki as much as you can to show that she's a real person. Yeah. The writing is so good that we're not being made to choose between which love is valid or real or deserves like first place in the story, because the story is not about like primacy. It's about intimacy. It's about like, not like who's first place in your life, although that is kind of what happens. But really, it is about intimacy. It's like the reason why Nikki can help Molly is because she's more comfortable being intimate with her. And Molly is more comfortable being intimate with Nikki. But through their relationship, which is the center and the focus of our story, they both achieve other intimacies that give them a greater home in the world and make them feel not like, you know, kind of like random outliers being weirdos together, but that they're seeing themselves in a way where it suddenly feels like the world is each person's to really be in. And Molly's experience is more brief because her life is ending. But once she starts to really give herself permission to adventure into intimacy, and it's so scary, there's just a whole world out there suddenly. And it's the same for Nikki, I think, at the end. She's at the helm now. Like, she's not even really an actor anymore at the end of the story. She is the director.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, to spoil Dying for Sex a little bit, like the last shot of the show is your face, and it's a real moment of about 10 different things, because I think the show is about 10 different things. And I mean, I think if you start overthinking about what your face looks like things don't really work out. But do you remember, like, how do you approach something like that where so much has to ride on just your face to close this whole story?
Yeah, so much is riding on all of our faces every day. You put your face to get upset. I'm really in the business of not psyching myself out.
Yeah.
And what that is for me is being really, really prepared for the day. My preparatory process for my scenes in this series was like really formulaic. It was like really formulaic how I would do it. And maybe, you know, you were saying you're putting your little ones to bed, like, as a parent also, it's like, okay, this is how much time I have, and this is how I'm going to use it effectively. I've never really been that person before because I had more time. But I also think I did not allow myself the like delightful legitimacy of process, like real process. And I was incredibly prepared for that moment. And I do think, as many actors will say, like, you prep so that you know everything, so that you can like let everything go. And I was just reacting to what I saw the other two actors doing. Yeah. You know, I feel like a free being. I can change. I can shape shift for sure. But I really like following direction. And I felt that I knew what the scene was supposed to be, and then I just let it take me. And then, you know, Shannon Murphy, who is extraordinary, and I just loved her, working with her so much. I hope I do it a million times, and I owe her so many thank yous just for the way she discussed acting with me. But anyway, she would come in and just be like, okay, can you cry a little bit in this one? And then we would do that and cry a little bit. And then she'd be like,
and you're like, great, I got it.
No crying. And be like, okay, no crying. And then, you know, and like just trying it a lot of different ways. And I remember on that day just feeling as finely tuned in the scene as I often do in my personal life. Like with my friendships or my husband, my family, especially with my daughter, it's like, I feel like everything's so sensitive, and I can feel like every filament of feeling, and that sucks sometimes also. Like, like, you know, like, you know, I'm glad I go to therapy. Like, it really sucks. But sometimes you don't get to feel that in acting because of nerves, or the writing isn't there, or you're tired and you play like more like one note, you know, and felt like I genuinely really did feel like that moment was just like, I remember imagining like if my feelings were going across my face as if I were a harp.
That's cool. You're not actors as their instrument. I feel like it gets pretentious, but it's totally
I didn't think about that, but it
no. But I don't hear it ever that specific. Like, that's exactly what I think people always mean to say, but don't say it correctly.
Sometimes feelings do, for me, really align with like the feeling of an object doing something. You know, a window being opened and fresh air, or you know, a sledgehammer coming down, or yeah, I like using imagery like that, and I like it when it comes to me like halfway through.
That does it for today's special Saturday episode. We'll be back on Sunday. Don't go anywhere. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theinkler.com and to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow.